when I came to Korea, and in my first semester of university, actually, I did a research about like multicultural families and how they live their lives here, because it's not really common. And the research was mainly about Filipino and Korean families, and usually Filipino wives and Korean husbands, and how they raise their kids and all those things. And we noticed that it's a really tricky process for them, because a lot of people don't like marrying or having relationships with foreigners for the long term, because they're like, oh, if we have kids, they'll be bullied in school. They won't be accepted, because they're not fully Korean, because their looks might be different, because they might not speak proper Korean or whatever. And their families that I've been in contact with, we can see that the children, they go through this acculturation process where only the Korean culture is recognized, and there's kind of an erasing of the other culture because they have to fit in. It didn't happen only in cases where the children were raised in the Philippines and then they got to mix pretty well both cultures. But it says a lot about who is accepted, who is not. And I think there's still some stigma around being different. And I think in Japan it can be even worse than here.
Yeah.
You can talk about it.
Yeah. So some people don't even like to use the word half. I know, like in the US, the Asian American community, they don't like to be called half because it means like they're not entire, They start using the word hapa, which comes from Hawaii, which is also somehow problematic because they're not Hawaiians, but another topic. But here in Japan, I've noticed that although people, when they become older, some people say, oh, half Japanese are pretty and it's cool to be half somehow, blah, blah, blah. Actually, it's not so nice for the everyday life, especially when they're kids. Many people get bullied in school because they look different. Or I've heard from some people who are like half Japanese, half black. And the kids, they are not used to seeing someone with a different skin color, and they bully them because of their skin color or because of their hair, which is very, very, very bad, Like, people, let's educate those children, right? To accept diversity.
Yeah.
And I think even when people become a little bit older, it's not that easy to become part of Japanese society. Like, for example, I know some people who they said because they're Japanese, because they're half Japanese, people come to them expecting them to speak English, for example. And sometimes they're not even like half American or half British or half Australian. And people expect them to speak English because they look foreigner, or they're not really recognized as full Japanese because of their looks, although they maybe have only like this Japanese mindset and only speak Japanese. And about half Japanese that are like half Asian and half other types of like ethnicities in Asia and Japanese is also like, most of them, I think they kind of behave the way they are just Japanese. Most people, they don't even know that they are half. They don't really talk about it. I mean, some people do. I know some people do, but they are not really engaged in the other culture of their other parent who is not Japanese. And I think it's problematic that, if we talk about even the case of the Miss Japan.
Miss Japan.
Yeah, from 2015, Ariana Miyamoto, she was elected as like Miss Japan, and she was half Japanese, half black, American, Afro-American, I think, right? And half Japanese. And many people like from Japan, they were being really racist and saying that she didn't really deserve the title because she doesn't look like a Japanese, although she was born and raised in Japan, spoke Japanese, and she's Japanese. Just because one of her parents are not from here, it doesn't mean she's not. In
her case,
it's only like
pretty
accepting.
Dramatic. I think her case is pretty dramatic. I mean, the reasons why she got into the Miss Japan in the first place and everything. Because I saw an interview. You want to explain it?
Just to add something, and then you can explain the interview. But to accept one type of person, one type of body shape, one type of eye shape as Japanese does not make sense. Even in Japan, there is some kind of diversity inside of it,
Yeah,
and
it does.
to accept one standard is really, really strict and really, really nonsense for me.
Yeah. So the case of Ariana Miyamoto, that's her name?
Yeah.
I think I saw an interview some time ago that she talked about the reason she decided to run for Miss Japan. I think it was because of a friend of hers that was also half Japanese, and she suffered really like heavy bullying and all those things to the point that led her to commit suicide. So when that happened, she got really like enraged by the situation and how unfair it was, because just because you look different, you have to suffer so much. And that's what led her to try to be Miss Japan, like, because winning or not, being in that position is a political position. It's like, here I am, I deserve to be seen, I deserve to be accepted. We half Japanese deserve a place in this country because we were born here, etc. So I think, first of all, her running this competition and also being elected as Miss Japan is already really meaningful. And also the reaction to that shows a lot about what's going on in the society itself.
Yeah, and then it leads us to the question of where do we belong? Do we belong to the place we were born? Do we belong to the place we had our ancestors coming from? Or do we belong to somewhere else where we feel comfortable and safe and respected for who we are, right? I think this is a question that passes through many people's heads, especially if you were like us, mixed or coming from a different country that is, living as migrants, or if you're not super comfortable in your own culture, the culture you're raised in. Yeah, that's really something. And if you feel comfortable in your own environment, if you feel you belong to the place you were born, you're lucky.
You're very lucky, yeah.
Most people don't get to feel like this.
So finding sense of belonging is also finding community, is also finding values and things and that you can identify with. And it's a ongoing process, I would say. And it's good to know that you actually have the power and the agency to find it for yourself. And even if you wasn't naturally born like that, you feeling comfortable and feeling welcome somewhere, it's good to know that you can build it for yourself.
Yes, we can all find a place here.
Yeah.